A baby is born in a war-torn country and suffers for week after week until they tragically die a death of starvation before their 3rd month on this earth. But my question to you, did they choose to incarnate in this life, in that conflict, in that pit of suffering for a soul lesson and spiritual evolution? This is one of the most commonly held, most controversial beliefs in all of the trauma healing space. Let's extend it to the extreme, because if we don't extend it to the extreme, we will be in an echo chamber of people talking about their breakups and their parents arguing, which is tragic, but nowhere near as brutal as mass devastation. It needs to apply at every level. So, did the baby choose at a soul level to incarnate into this form of suffering for an evolution of their spiritual essence? What about the mother, the young mother, who was assaulted 10 months prior by an angry young soldier for that unwanted pregnancy to begin in the first place? What about the trauma that she suffers for the rest of her life because of the blood loss, the damage, the internal hemorrhaging, and the feeling of perpetual shame, guilt, and self-hatred? Did they all choose this for a lesson at the soul level? This idea of a soul descending to earth to choose its own suffering so that it can evolve is one of the most delusional, disrespectful, and downright disgusting ideas I've ever come across. And yet, it's also one of the most hopeful and truly life-nourishing, meaningful ways of dealing with suffering that somebody could possibly develop for themselves. In this video, I'm going to be trying to walk the middle ground between the two extremes. I'm not going to go as intense as I went to that introduction, but we need to go in at that level of intensity, because otherwise we're going to be trapped in a very superficial understanding of what it means, philosophically speaking, religiously speaking, for any eternal divine aspect of ourself to choose a life of suffering. It's both sides, and ultimately this video is going to present the middle ground in the form of psychological truth being more important than objective truth. But let's take today's guiding framework from Diane, who asked me this following question. Diane says, what are your thoughts when someone claims that they chose their trauma or grief before they were born? In regards to someone who had been assaulted or gone through serious loss at someone else's hand, what are your thoughts on the concept of stepping into one's power, for lack of a better term, by taking responsibility for other people's choices? Diane, thank you for the question. The reason I wanted to do a whole video on this topic is that in my last few years of working intimately and intensely with people who have suffered a range of traumas from parental, familial abuse from childhood, from birth onwards, not just physical and emotional, but that word that I can't say without YouTube potentially flagging this video, from birth to adolescence, through a breakup, through the death, through a loss, through addiction, through suffering, through racism, all of these different traumas, all of these different histories. There's always a moment in this one-to-one space that I invite people into where we come to this question of why. Why me? Why this suffering? And why this agony which is draining my life and destroying my desire to be on this earth for just one more day? It's an extreme question, but if we don't answer at the extreme, there's no validity in the softer edges. There's no reason to believe that a soul comes in for a lesson about a relationship or family conflict or being the weird, artistic, quirky kid who wasn't understood, if that doesn't also apply to the baby that dies in the war zone and the mother who suffers a life of agony, and let's even extend our empathy towards the soldier, all of their barbarity aside, who was ultimately peer pressured into a war that they maybe didn't want to go to, into a situation of proving their manhood by showing up and doing something like that to a woman. Tragically, it's not a fairy tale. That's really common in gang culture. It might not be that extreme, but causing violence to another as a way of proving yourself as a man. What are we doing here? Why is this happening? Ultimately, it comes to that question of, did I choose this? But it's even deeper. It's a very old religious question. At its core, when we're asking, did I choose my pain? We're asking, why does God allow for evil? And what's the point of it all? I was in a conversation recently with one of my one-to-one clients, and we spent at least half an hour, 40 minutes through tears and through choking in our throat, trying to understand, is it possible that God would allow evil in this world? You don't need to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or of any particular belief. You can just treat that idea of God as a theoretical kind of thought experiment if you don't have faith in that way. But why does evil happen? There are multiple paths that we can take, and ultimately I do believe that it's about psychological truth. I'm not going to stand here and lecture to you about what is right and what is wrong from a godly, bird's eye perspective of your incarnational path on planet Earth and think that I know the secrets of the back door, behind the scenes, incarnational group Zoom meeting where everyone decides that they're going to play the role of mom and play the role of dad and the abused child and the weird uncle. These are really common New Age belief systems, but they're built upon that older idea of destiny, fate, and even the Greek idea literally of your thread being woven and being cut by forces which are out of your control. What we've done to that idea is we've brought in a very modern, very 20th, late 20th, kind of 21st century idea of autonomy and self-actualization to truly believe that we're in control of these potentially random acts of destruction. But how could we possibly believe anything else? What choice does my client have when they're asking me the question, why did this happen? Why did I have to suffer? Why is this addiction destroying my health? Why have I lost yet another relationship? And why can't I find my way in the world? What do I say? Do I say, yes, it's because your soul chose this, and it's all happening for a reason, and the suffering that you went through was the wound which becomes the womb, it was the pain which becomes the gift, and here you are, ready to be a wounded healer on planet Earth, sharing your lessons and helping other people to heal from the same tragedy that miraculously they also chose. Some people respond to that, and it is completely appropriate. I'm not trying to shit on that idea. There's an anger that comes up in me, and I apologize if it's too inflammatory, but the reason that the anger arises is the sheer insensitivity and dogmatic clinging to this idea from people who haven't done proper thinking, particularly the type of shadow thinking where if you can't step outside of a beloved ideal, let's say I have a beloved ideal that I'll go with something not so confrontational. My eyes, I've got bad eyes. I wear contact lenses, and if I can't have my lenses in, I can see about that clearly. I can't even read a book if it's out here. I have really bad eyesight. And for years, up until the age of 10, I never got glasses. It was completely, somehow, bizarrely not picked up by my family or my school. And the very first moment I put glasses on, little state break of emotion, I was sat in the car after going to the shopping centre with my mother, and I put the glasses on because I was embarrassed to wear them in public, so I put them on in the car. And of course, the first thing that I see is a row of pine trees suddenly plunged into high definition, and I felt a feeling of euphoria that I could finally see. That's a brief moment of euphoria. The reality is I don't enjoy having bad eyesight. It is not enjoyable to wake up in the morning with bad eyes and be disoriented, especially after a night of dreaming. It's not enjoyable to be training Muay Thai, be hit in the face in friendly sparring. My contact lens comes out and I have to stop. That literally limits my ability to progress in that sport in the way that I might want to. Is that the tragedy I chose? I could accept that. I could say, well, I chose to not see in the outer world so that I could see into the inner world, and it's not about this material plane, it's about the imaginal plane, therefore my eyes are not relevant. I could weave a story very beautifully in the same way as being a musician who doesn't have hearing, or someone who's cursed with some kind of ailment which they're gonna hero arc their way around and come to the ultimate triumph moment. That's a useful fiction. This is an idea that comes up in a lot of the psychological literature, especially Jungian literature and transpersonal literature. It's the idea of a healing fiction to be more precise, and this is where we tie into psychological truth. My healing fiction was something which is very mundane, like having bad eyesight, which is pain, but definitely not agony. That can apply because the stakes aren't too high. If I were to go into a client situation with someone who has been repeatedly abused since birth until the age of 10, or the age of 15, or the age of 20, or it's still going on, they're literally in the whirlpool of agony, and I say to them, well, yes, you did actually choose this. Have you not read the reincarnation books? Have you not done your spiritual work? Have you not done your regressional hypnosis? Come on, let's get on the same page. They would feel like I am the most insensitive, barbaric brute of a so-called therapeutic support that they would ever encounter, and they would probably do their best to completely destroy my reputation to anyone that they encountered, because it's not appropriate, it's insensitive. And yet, if one session later, after I respond with a very much at its core answer of, I don't know, what do you think? How about this? How about that? If they come to me with a few dreams later that week and they say, oh yes, I can consider the possibility that I chose this because of the way that I was hurt did create these challenges, but now that I've healed from them, I have this new relationship with this new person and this new job, and therefore that fills me with meaning. They might get to that resolution point on their own, but the key message that I want to share in this video, and to answer Diane's question, no one can decide for you if the soul came in for trauma, lesson, and spiritual evolution, or if it's all just a tragic play on the stage that we call home. God might roll the dice. God may not roll any dice and not be interested in any of our human affairs. But the gift of being a conscious adult, being someone who's watching this video and isn't a toddler, get angry, can't even say my words. Not being a toddler who's told what to believe, and not being a child who has to dogmatically hold onto this idea that your trauma was chosen before birth and therefore that's the only truth, but to do the really difficult thinking of stepping back and potentially sitting in agony a little while longer as you consider the question, what if it was all meaningless? What if it was just shit? What if it would just be shit? And what can I do about this? This is getting towards the stage of acceptance and a feeling of isness with the situation that you've actually been dealt, rather than trying to leap into a faith-based resurrection or some kind of salvation from your own subconscious wishful fantasy thinking. And yet I'm not saying that that's wrong. I've definitely done this myself, but we need to do both. I can have a belief that my eyesight was always meant to be bad so that I could develop my inner capacity and I could link it to different areas of my life, as Jordan Thornton in a work where I have loads of dreams and this is a personality that I play, and it doesn't matter if my eyes are shut or my eyes are open, I'm seeing things beyond the veil, and aren't I a magical, mystical man? But that does sound like very grandiose, very self-inflating, literally put that pump right into somewhere where the sun don't shine and pump me up so that I can be larger than life and full of air. We have to watch for ourselves. We have to watch for the stories that we bring forwards. Diane asked at the end of her question, how can we work through this in terms of respecting? I think I'll bring it up actually directly. I don't want to misquote her. Diane says at the end of her question, what are your thoughts on the concept of stepping into one's power, for lack of a better term, by taking responsibility for other people's choices? What a question. How do we take responsibility for someone else's choice to abuse us when we were vulnerable? How do we take responsibility for someone else's choice to assault us and give us an unwanted pregnancy? That is a space which I cannot speak to with any authority, and I don't know if anyone can, because it truly is the unresolvable mystery where we need psychological truth to provide the healing fiction. Potentially, hopefully, it's a healing fact, and some people really do love the idea, and for them, the genuinely confirmed belief in reincarnation. I've done a different episode on this before in Inner Work Essentials. It's one of those tricky territories. How do you claim back power from a situation which keeps you feeling powerless? Stories. A useful story, a powerful story. Viktor Frankl writes in Doctor and the Soul. He also wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which I'm sure you're aware of, but he wrote in Doctor and the Soul, which is more his psychotherapeutic professional work, that logotherapy, that way of finding existential meaning in the void, really is one of the core questions of therapy. And this is the same thread, essentially, that Diane's asking. How do we find meaning in agony? How do we choose hope when we have suffered? And how do we continue to move forwards, doing our healing work and integrating the parts which still burn without giving up the faith that it could change? I ultimately don't care if you go either way. You can go all the way into the soul level perspective and the New Age style belief, but ultimately the very old idea that things happen for a reason, or you could go into the more temporarily nihilistic, nothing happens for a reason, it is literally just shit. What are you going to do about it kind of belief? Different people need different things. And the ultimate complexity is that if you really analyze your own thinking, this is a bit of a call out. If you really analyze your own thinking, even on a day-to-day basis, you will have different parts of yourself that lean one way or another. So in terms of big stories, perhaps a breakup, you might attach the story that it happened for a reason and everything was in divine timing and it was a perfect synchronicity. When it comes to your foot being stubbed against the wall, is that a soul level choice? How far does fate go backwards? How many details, how much variability? This is a huge psychological question. So of course, I can't give you a concrete answer. You probably can't give yourself a concrete answer if you're truly doing complex adult thinking, because complex adult thinking, as I said, is both and, not either or. And it's being willing to shift between those that pendulum going backwards and forwards, a spiral of healing going backwards and forwards, and we find wholeness. Here we go. Nice little diagram update. The spiral goes backwards and forwards, from light to dark, from healed to unhealed, and we reach temporary wholeness when we realize that the spiral, once we turn it like this, as it completes, becomes a circle. That's whole. That's a whole experience until it goes back again, and suddenly we don't have a circle, until it comes all the way back, and then temporary circle. We never really reach a feeling of wholeness. We might be temporarily settled into the sunny Caribbean beach of wholeness for a week or two. But I think the process is really, how far are we going to go along that spiral? And if for you, it provides meaning and hope and power and strength and virtue and righteousness and the feeling of love for yourself and other people, to hold on to that belief and defend that belief that the world is the way it is, and all the suffering of the world, all of the wars and the genocides and the addiction issues and the disconnection that we're facing in the modern day is for a reason, and that our souls have collectively chosen this experience for a spiritual evolution beyond our comprehension. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you've got that powerful faith to guide you forwards. And if you're someone who can't possibly engage with that idea, that's also fine, but I hope you find something which is equally, if not stronger, to be able to pull you through those times where the darkness clouds in around you. In terms of my own personal suggestion, again, I don't know. I think a truly mature response is to say that you don't know, and it's a sign of someone who hasn't done the shadow work or hasn't truly done the proper unconscious explorations if they dogmatically go one way or the other. That's the ultimate conclusion I'm going to leave this on. If you have your own strong view, please leave it in the comment. I am very much willing to be swayed in one way or another. I'm probably not going to go all the way to an extreme, but I'm always looking for new information, because this is really a question that comes up in every single one-to-one situation that I have the privilege to be a part of. Why does God allow evil things to happen, and why must evil exist in this world? And what's my role in this space, and what can I do about it? I'm not going to answer the question for you. I will engage with your response down below. But in the meantime, just look after yourself. This is a really difficult and confusing journey, and there's no single truth. It's psychological truth which matters when it comes to healing and the internal world. Of course, just honor that other people's psychological truth is likely to be very different. Otherwise, you might come across just a little bit abrasive and a little bit insensitive. I hope this helped. Next episode in the series, feel free to get involved, but that's the one over there, and I'll see you over there.